I thought that marrying a doctor meant that everything was settled for life, but it turned out that I didn't show up at the moment she started her career. Let me explain. I first met Karen when we were both studying at different community colleges to cut costs. She was incredibly smart and spoke well, easily discussing a variety of topics, but at the same time, she was very naive and not the most practical. The cost of tuition at community colleges is much lower than at four-year educational institutions, which was one of the main factors that influenced my decision. My father, who was educated only in elementary school and learned the rest from his own experience, struggled to earn a decent living as a general contractor. Despite the fact that there was a lot of work, he earned little. I worked for him as a child and noticed his flaws. He was stubborn, did not take advice well, and was inclined to reject those who, in his opinion, were too smart or competent. Unfortunately, he did not understand how important it was to hire smart specialists and often took on more work than he could do alone. As a result, most of his projects went over budget, which hindered the company's growth. Deciding not to repeat his mistakes, I saw education as my path to success. By coincidence, Karen and I crossed paths during summer school, just before we both planned to transfer to the University of Massachusetts. I participated in a self-education program in which I attended courses in mechanical engineering and civil engineering, as well as chemistry, history, and social studies. I preferred not to take overloads as it was not worth the extra cost, and as long as I got grades of B or higher, I was satisfied. Such a diverse set of subjects helped me develop writing, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. I focused on the subjects that interested me and ignored the ones that didn't. Karen was preparing for admission to the medical academy, took lighter subjects, and aspired to get only A's, which is very important for future doctors who should have a complete understanding of their specialty. After all, we would not like to have a doctor who knows only 70 to 80% of what is wrong with us. I saw college as a professional school for life, striving to become a successful contractor, which my father was not. My goal was to get all the necessary knowledge and even more. We both got our bachelor's degrees together. Karen was lucky, with no relatives in the medical field or influential references. The medical school in Philadelphia accepted her and awarded her a modest scholarship. After moving to Philadelphia, Karen and I tied the knot that summer. I felt liberated from my father's control, replacing his strict rules with more gentle guidance from my wife. Her father, realizing her bright future and foreseeing my possible financial difficulties, insisted on concluding a prenuptial agreement. As a generous wedding gift, he made a down payment of 20% on the purchase of our new house. The contract stated that her personal property and income remained hers alone. In the event of a divorce, there would be no alimony or child support, and each of us would keep what we earned. The wedding gift was originally intended exclusively for her, as he believed that we would not be buying a house in the near future. His reluctance to spend money freely was well known. I agreed to the gift but asked to adjust it so that it would be beneficial to both of us equally. I made it clear that she would not receive alimony benefits or any of my money. In addition, I suggested that we not be responsible for each other's debts. She hesitated because of the large school debts, but I reminded her that if my contracting business went bankrupt and creditors managed to circumvent corporate protection, she would also be responsible for the debts. This settled the dispute. Her father was pleased that his family was shielded from my supposed flaws, but I didn't care. We lived far away from him and saw each other only occasionally. We started our marriage with separate finances, each with their own credit cards and checking accounts. Being more financially savvy, I took over the management of our money, earned income, paid bills, and signed checks for both her and myself. I created a system to control our income and expenses. While my wife earned a minimal income during her studies, splitting our finances was more of a theoretical exercise. My stay in Philadelphia paid off. I got a job with a contractor, which allowed me to support both of us and get to know the area. At the same time, my wife had accumulated significant student loan debt, which she had to start paying off after graduating from university. Despite the financial burden, I did not lose optimism, knowing that doctors usually receive a significant salary. Despite my wife's advice, I decided to go on an independent voyage. In fact, I was considered a fool, and my own father supported this opinion, but I proved them wrong by making a quick profit. Karen and I both worked tirelessly, devoting countless hours to our careers. We treasured the time we spent together, and I tried to be with her whenever she had a free moment. Although it was not easy, our youth, strength, and love for each other moved us forward. She planned her pregnancy so that she would give birth a month after graduating from university, and she achieved her goal. 2 weeks later, a beautiful girl was born. The residency turned out to be even more time-consuming than medical school. She felt like an underpaid maid in a hospital dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if our marriage really stood up during her residency. Have you heard about residents getting into relationships with each other during the night shift? I doubt that was the case with her because she was constantly exhausted. The only thing colder than her was a block of ice. It was a difficult and isolating period for me, but I found solace in my daughter and a thriving business. Unfortunately, we both got used to the fact that the other was not around. The internship and subsequent medical practice required 50 to 60 hours a week with an unpredictable work schedule. Meanwhile, I took care of our daughter diligently, making a schedule in my diary. Juggling the needs of my daughter, wife, and myself was not easy. It was painful for me to rely on kindergarten for our daughter because she spent so much time with strangers. To be closer to her, I bought a room across the street from the kindergarten and moved my office there. Banks and mortgage brokers lured her with mortgage offers with no down payment and no credit check. After showing them the salary receipt, she quickly chose a new place for herself. Since it was her money, I had practically no right to vote. She wanted a modern McMansion-style home, and I preferred a vintage pre-war house. In the end, we settled on a new, poorly built house that was a 45-minute drive from my office. Her father's wedding gift also became an end-of-residency gift, making the deal 2 for the price of 1. He made an initial payment of $30,000, which was a significant amount for him, but his daughter dreamed of a mansion worth $700,000. His contribution covered only taxes and closing costs. At an interest rate of 7%, the mortgage alone was $4,500 a month. If you take into account additional expenses such as taxes, heating, house maintenance, car expenses, and various insurances, then the monthly bill grew to $6,500. In addition, student loan payments amounted to another $5,000 per month. I tried to convince her to consider a more modest house for $250,000 or $300,000, but she was set on the house of her dreams. After all the hard work I'd put in over the years, she wanted to spend it all on a house. It didn't make sense to me. We're young, shouldn't we enjoy life and not burden ourselves with a big house? Unfortunately, my efforts were in vain. Worse, over the next 3 years, she took out loans to fill the house with flashy and substandard furniture. It annoyed me that the beautiful traditional handmade furniture that I inherited from my uncle was now being used to decorate my den and spare bedroom. The idea of getting into big debts also seemed unwise to me. In my business, I have always carefully monitored debts, realizing that undercapitalization can pose a serious threat. Despite this, my business was booming. Moreover, things were going exceptionally well. Wanting to spend more time with my family, I decided to move my office closer to home. It was then that an exciting opportunity opened up in front of me. I was working on a major restoration project for a magnificent mansion from the Great Gatsby era. To date, I have billed over $350,000 for structural and exterior repairs alone, but the owner had financial difficulties and was forced to sell the mansion. Despite the fact that a mechanic's lien was placed on the house, he was unable to pay me $110,000, and about $30,000 of this amount was for materials that had been ordered but not yet used. There was a charming gatehouse and carriage house just 10 minutes away from my home. It was located on an acre of land, surrounded by a rocky slope but with a beautiful view. It was separated from the main estate by a 25-foot road going up the hill, so it could be easily separated from the mansion. Despite the neglected appearance, I saw the potential in the buildings and offered to buy them for the amount of debt plus another $45,000 in cash. The owner readily accepted my offer, which prompted me to quickly complete the current projects and create a straw company to finalize the purchase of the property. I converted the carriage house into office space, preserving its original appearance, including the arched double doors, to maintain its historical charm and potential future use as a garage. As soon as my new office was ready, I started repairing the gatehouse. During periods of downtime, I engaged a team to work on the house to ensure that repairs continued without interruption. When I brought my wife to see the new office, she immediately assumed I was just renting it. She showed no interest, didn't ask about the cost or anything else, and simply said that the room looked outdated and suggested demolishing it to build something better. It struck me that something so significant in my life was unimportant to her, making me doubt my decision to marry her. I thought about ending the marriage, but I knew that any relationship has its difficulties. I tried to express my gratitude to her and gave her all my attention, hoping for the best. We had a circle of couples with whom we enjoyed spending time: doctors, representatives of different professions, businessmen, public figures, and heads of non-profit organizations. Although we weren't rich, we weren't middle class either. If you hadn't known about the financial difficulties she was facing, you would have thought everything was fine with us. As expected, several doctors did not feel comfortable communicating with me, and some engineers and businessmen couldn't connect with my wife, who was a doctor. Over time, my wife began to gravitate towards communicating with people from the medical field. Although we found a few couples that we both enjoyed spending time with, I couldn't help but notice a change in our dynamic. I started taking on more responsibilities around the house, becoming the main childcare assistant in our family. I constantly adjusted my schedule according to her needs and filled in for her when needed. It seemed like I was always putting off my own plans to support her, whether it was picking up our daughter from school or rearranging my day because she was late at work. Despite this, sometimes she agreed to do something with me, but it was rare and often canceled at the last minute. I understand how important a doctor is to many people, but we were her family. It was obvious who she put above all else. Mildred never complained, but I felt she was taking on more childcare responsibilities than necessary. In the modern world, interruptions from work by other people are inevitable. I get calls from work and suppliers outside of business hours and have separate mobile phones for work and personal use. My wife also carries a phone with her, and most of the calls that come in after hours I quickly resolve over the phone within a few minutes. For many years, my wife's schedule was pretty constant except when she was on call, but at the end of the summer, everything changed. As soon as the phone rang, she immediately rushed to the hospital. It's part of a doctor's job, right? She worked as a family doctor in a fairly large clinic where everyone took turns on duty, but it seemed to me that she was called more often than her colleagues. On a warm Saturday afternoon in late September, the two of us were working in the yard and around the house. After getting dirty and sweaty, we took a shower before dinner. I refused a quick intimacy, promising to have a good night. That was fine with me. When we sat on the terrace after dinner, drinking coffee and listening to the joyful sounds of children playing, I couldn't help but think, this is life. At about 7:30 p.m., her signal interrupted a peaceful moment. Karen checked the message with a sigh of disappointment, then stood up and announced, I need to go to the hospital. Before I leave, I should probably change my clothes. She was wearing a clean white t-shirt decorated with a large red cross with the inscription Blood Donation for Life. It looked appropriate. Her white shorts and shiny red sneakers created an atmosphere of casual elegance. She had just showered and changed into fresh clothes, and I couldn't help but ask, why would you change again if you need to put on medical clothes? She looked at me strangely. Oh yes, well I have to go. I'll be back home as soon as I'm done. A little after 8, my daughter Carrie arrived looking exhausted and covered in mud after a strenuous game. She was a complete mess, so I decided to treat her to ice cream before swimming. Her laughter filled the air when we invited her best friend Jennifer for a spontaneous walk. We ended up driving across town to Smedley's, a local ice cream parlor known for its homemade treats. Sitting on a picnic bench and enjoying a pistachio nut cone, I couldn't help but admire the stylish moms in summer outfits passing by. Then I witnessed a truly unique sight. An old Indian motorcycle passed by, specifically a Maine model from about 48, in a dazzling yellow color with white accents and sparkling chrome details. Its distinctive exhaust sound was a deep, pleasant hum that modern motorcycles can never replicate. I immediately recognized this classic motorcycle because my older brother had a carefully crafted model of the same make and year that I still dream about. The driver, a slightly overweight man, was sitting in the driver's seat wearing jeans and a denim jacket, as well as black leather shoes. Behind him, holding tightly to the seat, was a woman in a helmet with an American flag and a protective shield, a white t-shirt advertising blood donation, blue jeans, and shiny red sneakers. When the summer evening began to cool down, I wished she had brought a jacket with her. Even though I tried to look carefree and happy, it wasn't easy. The kids in the back seat were too busy laughing and having fun to notice my mood changes. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was relieved when I realized that I had forgotten to send her the quarterly student loan payment last Friday. Most of this money came from my own funds, so it would look like a waste. From that moment on, I decided to stop covering all expenses that belonged to her. It was clear that if I continued to pay for her house, car, and other possessions, it would quickly empty both her checking account and the savings account attached to it. I continued to pay most of her bills, but now I made sure to use only her checking account. By Monday morning, I decided to hire a divorce lawyer. He agreed to review the prenuptial agreement, although he was familiar with the lawyer who drafted it and assumed it would be thorough. He noted that while everything can be disputed, documentary evidence of adultery is not required but can potentially be useful in a custody dispute over a child, though the probability of this is low since mothers usually receive custody. The second call was made to a friend who was interested in antique cars, particularly Indian Chief motorcycles, which are very valuable and not so easy to get. Without any hesitation, he said with certainty that the motorcycle belonged to Dr. Alfred Hale. Although I didn't know him personally, his name was well known as a big shot in the hospital. Now this mystery was solved. The third call was made to an investigator recommended by my insurance agent for my business. The investigator's name was Samir Patel, Sam for short. I had no reason to keep an eye on my wife. I was sure she was having an affair with only one person, but Dr. Alfred Hale was a completely different matter, and I wanted to get back at him. I instructed Sam to gather information about Dr. Hale and told him what I already knew. I was willing to pay an additional fee for expedited service, but it turned out that the guy wasn't very busy. He offered me a discount and assured me that he would start working on my project immediately. I gave him a deposit of $3,000 to start work in the first week and asked him to provide photographs, audio, and video materials if any. I also advised him to be careful and to protect himself in case things went wrong when he realized he was being deceived. The fourth call was to one of the construction managers, and I told him to start gathering workers to complete the construction of the gatehouse to get permission for commissioning. Otherwise, it was an ordinary day. I tried to maintain a sense of normality even though I knew that my marriage was only a few weeks away from ending. Later in the evening, enjoying the silence and sipping coffee, my wife mentioned that next Friday and Saturday she would be attending a Merck-sponsored medical conference in New York and that she needed to go. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "In one of the best hotels in New York, the Greenpoint Plaza," she replied. I could only imagine how much a room in this hotel usually costs. Curious, I took out my iPhone to look up the hotel. Wait a minute, Greenpoint is in Brooklyn, and so is the hotel. It looks decent but not particularly luxurious. Look at this picture, only $110 a night. Can you imagine? It's too small for a hotel like this. This is not an elite hotel like the Crowne Plaza. It looks like I got the name of the hotel wrong. I'll check again to make sure. That evening, my wife and I became intimate for the first time in a long time. I'm ashamed that I was the initiator. I took out the contraceptives as I usually did before and put it on unnoticed by her before continuing. The Wednesday leading up to her weekend at the conference was very eventful. I met with my lawyer to review the draft divorce papers. He advised me to make sure that my business finances were well protected in case of a violation of the prenuptial agreement, which he considered reliable. I doubted I'd lose that much. There were ambiguities about alimony and whether a prenuptial agreement had been concluded. I insisted that the child was mine and I wanted to provide for her, but the lawyer advised me to pay alimony without the participation of the court. My accountant asked for a few weeks to stash the cash reserve that I had in the business. I joked that as contractors, we usually like money to come out of nowhere, not the other way around, and asked him to hide 75% for a week. In the afternoon, I finally met the investigator face-to-face for the first time. He offered to meet at Starbucks, explaining that he usually works from home and prefers to keep a low profile. He shared valuable information with me. Dr. Hale constantly rents the same hotel room on Mondays, Thursdays, and sometimes on Saturdays. It's always the same room number, which intrigued me a lot. On Thursday, he brought a woman into the room, and they spent about an hour and a half together, from noon to 1:30 p.m. I had never seen her before, but she had beautiful red hair. Her name is Eileen McCormick, and she works for a company that provides field nursing services, as evidenced by the sticker on her car. I have her personal data, which you can review. Unfortunately, the curtains were tightly closed, so I couldn't take any photos, but I managed to record a full audio recording of their conversation. When they left the room, they looked very attached to each other. Here is another photo of them together. Dr. Hale returned to the hospital, and what happened next was shocking. I was overjoyed when he returned to the motel at 6 p.m., arrived at 6:15 p.m., and entered the same room. At 6:25 p.m., a woman arrived and entered his room, exactly the same as the previous one. He pushed the photo towards me and said, "I'm sorry, this is your wife, but you already knew about this, didn't you?" We also have an audio recording of this meeting. Welcome to the world of Viagra. This is the first time I've come across a man dating two women in the same room on the same day. It turned out that he does this at least twice a week. I managed to get into the room, and following your instructions, set up the sound and video. Someone will be nearby and record his actions when he is inside. Here is a CD with recordings of your wife and another woman we don't know who came with Dr. Hale. I expressed my gratitude. Sam, if everything goes wrong, is there any chance that you will be tracked down? I'm serious, finding the source of these images can cost a lot of money. No. I assure you, they won't be able to track me down unless you reveal my involvement. I'm careful. You will notice that none of my fingerprints are on these pictures, and you will not find anything of mine in the room, he assured me. I told him to continue recording until further notice, but to avoid filming from the sidelines. After paying another $3,000 in cash, I left feeling anxious and with a bitter taste in my mouth that had nothing to do with coffee. The next day, I took a step towards closing our joint credit card accounts, telling Karen that this was necessary for better financial management. I also completed the final allocation of funds. Every week, I received a video disc in the mail. He had 2 cameras and probably 2 microphones. Naturally, I looked through all the recordings, but I paid special attention to those that my wife was present at. I painstakingly analyzed every word and gesture, almost obsessively. It seemed to have been a therapeutic experience for me. The more I watched, the more my emotions towards her faded. Physically, Dr. Hale looked in decent shape for his age. He was much older than me, maybe 15 or 20 years. Obviously, exercise wasn't a priority for him. His outfit was similar to mine. I was pleased to note that his waist is slightly larger than mine by about 4 to 5 inches. As a rule, during the sessions, he commanded, telling the women what he wanted, and they readily complied with his requests without hesitation. I envied the enthusiasm and willingness with which she fulfilled his requests, and I wished she were the same with me. On reflection, I admitted that I may have contributed to our unsatisfactory intimate life by not being more assertive. When my wife rejected my advances, I let her boss me around in the bedroom. But now Hale was testing her boundaries, and she was ready to obey. It was all about pleasing each other. Perhaps my expectations were too low, as I now understand. Work on the gatehouse was in full swing, there was only a week left. I contacted my lawyer but found out that he was on vacation. I made it clear to his assistant that I needed the documents by next Wednesday, as agreed. I was ready to start the divorce process and leave her home and life behind. Our daughter was visiting the neighbors, and we enjoyed a glass of wine on the terrace on the eve of her medical conference. Feeling the need to overcome the increasing distance between us, I made one last attempt to save our marriage. I asked, "Do you think my wife will ever come back?" Confused, my wife replied, "What are you talking about?" I explained, "It seems to me that you have been estranged from Carrie and me for a long time, as if you had left our family. Who did you find instead of us, and do you have any plans to return?" A heavy silence hung in the air. I was about to get up and leave when she said softly, "He's a doctor at the hospital. I can't tell you his name, but I believe that we love each other." It seems to be true. Sometimes emotions are hard to decipher, aren't they? I'll get a clearer answer in a month or so. And no, I can't let him go. I'm sorry, but it's true. I still care about you, but... Her voice trailed off and she fell silent. I also fell silent. You're not going to say anything? You haven't finished yet. You said you love me, darling. I want to know how long you've been feeling this way, how often, and most importantly, why. What can he offer that I don't have? It's a difficult situation, but I have strong feelings for you, or what I thought was love. With him, it's a completely different kind of love. We've been dating for about a month, maybe 6 weeks. There's no clear reason why this happened, it just happened. He's no better or worse than you, he's just different. So, every time your phone rings, do you go to help those in need, or does the doctor require your attention? Could you give me your hand for a minute? She held out her left hand, and I took it in mine. Karen, please don't act like that. It's not what you think. I just need to make sure, and it's just a matter of a few weeks, please. I took her hand in both of mine and carefully removed her wedding and engagement rings. It wasn't until I took off my wedding ring and put it on her hand that she realized. Hey, bring them back. I can't live without them. They belong to me. Karen, if they are not on my fingers, it will be noticed. Please return them. That's not my problem. I calmly took 2 coins out of my pocket, stood up, and threw them into the yard. In the dim light, she saw something shiny fly through the air and assumed it was a valuable piece of jewelry worth thousands of dollars. So, go and look for them. If you really wanted to save the marriage that these rings symbolize, this problem wouldn't exist. Besides, you might be surprised to find out how many people know about your actions. You are both well known in this city. Let them know. Let them know how lucky you are that a famous doctor chose you as his mistress. Convince them that he values you more than anything in the world and even plans to leave his wife and marry you when the time comes. Personally, I don't mind. Karen, please refrain from using vulgar language. How do you know everything? I chuckled. Despite your intelligence, you seem dumb. It's a common tactic for married men to confess their love to their extramarital partners in order to keep the affair going. Women who consider themselves virtuous may believe that this is necessary for a lasting commitment. A real woman enters into extramarital affairs for the sake of thrills and pleasure, while those who are called escorts do it solely for financial gain. It is not uncommon for a man to eventually divorce his wife, perhaps in 1 case out of 5, especially if the marriage was already difficult. In some cases, he even marries his partner. And yet, statistics show that in 24 cases out of 25, the affair ends. But who said that true love can't blossom in such a situation? Perhaps you and your partner will be an exception, remaining faithful in a new relationship. And who knows, maybe you'll even spend your free time together in a more unconventional way, like dissecting corpses in the basement. When she stormed into her bedroom, slamming the doors as she went, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of reaction she expected from me. I prepared a detailed reality check for her, listing all the family's expenses, her income, student loan payments, mortgage payments, taxes, car payments, utilities, and insurance. The figures showed the harsh reality. Everything was in a negative balance. She found herself in a financial hole of $1,000 a week and could hardly afford the most necessary things, food and gasoline. I strategically timed the bill payments so that her account would be almost empty on the appointed day. The next day, she insisted that it was a medical conference and left for the whole day. I took action. I canceled our shared credit cards, although she still had 1 left for business expenses. I made sure to make copies of our accounts and tax returns so she could use them in the future. I left her the names and contact information of an oil burner repairman, a lawn maintenance worker, a snowplow operator, and a handyman. After reviewing my tax returns, I was pleased to see that despite my attempts to understate and hide my income over the past 3 years, I actually earned more than she did. It was a positive result. Perhaps it's better not to overload her with unnecessary information right now. She's gone, and at the moment, I'd rather she wasn't there. There was no need to give her a reason to come back. I put aside the income tax documents, knowing that sooner or later she would pick them up. The movers arrived at 11 a.m. on Friday and spent most of their time in my office, loading one truck with my uncle's furniture, family belongings, my bureau, and the contents of my closet. I felt quite generous and hired a cleaning service to keep everything clean. Before leaving, I put her financial documents in bills and boxes, as well as all the little things we found during the cleaning, in the drawers and on the floor. I left the divorce papers that I signed on the kitchen table. Before I finally left, I left a note on the refrigerator. I closed the door on an entire chapter of my life at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. The next day, my daughter and I went to the store to buy furniture for her bedroom and equip her new room in my house. The renovated house looked amazing, new windows with thermal panels to match the old ones, original plaster restored with fresh paint and stencils, and everything freshly cleaned, varnished, and painted. The team had done a great job, which I attributed either to their respect for me or the difficulties in finding a job in the current market. On Sunday evening, Karen called me in a panic at 10 p.m. and informed me that she was bankrupt. I listened briefly and then said, "These are your problems, they don't concern me. Take your problems to Dr. Willis. Let him help you and give you money." There were screams of anger, regret, and pain on the phone. "You're talking nonsense," I said firmly. "I'll be at your place tomorrow at 7 o'clock to discuss this further. Carrie is safe with me now. I think it would be better if we shared custody. We can create a schedule that will take into account your responsibilities. Please don't call me again until tomorrow." I abruptly ended the conversation, but the phone immediately rang again. It was her. "Don't call Carrie either. She's been in bed for an hour. I know you're hysterical, but you can scare her if you call. Let me know what day and hour you want her to stay with you. I need to know when I'll see you tomorrow. Good night." She seemed to expect me to wait until she found someone else she liked better. The doctor didn't think that I might have my own thoughts. Maybe she doesn't appreciate what she has until it's gone. What does she think I'm going to do? Imagine how she talks. "Dear, thank you for cooking a delicious dinner. Could you help Carrie with her homework when you finish washing the dishes? I know you have to get up early for work tomorrow, so don't wait for me. My lover just called and he needs intimacy, so I can't keep him waiting." That should make any husband want to stay, right? Such a stupid thought. It was 7 o'clock in the evening, and to annoy her, I took an appetizing Italian sub from an amazing delicatessen. I made sure that the crispy bread wouldn't get wet. I came in late, in dirty and sweaty work clothes and boots. I knocked on the door, but the dirty clothes were just for show. I had been diligently engaged in improving my new home. She opened the door looking great in a low-cut blouse, a thin lace bra, a short skirt, and barefoot. She noticed the package in my hand and said, "Oh, how sweet, you brought something for me. I think we're both sorry." She invited me in, saying she had cooked dinner. I corrected her by saying, "You misunderstood everything. I'm not sorry. I'm glad I found out who you really are before I lost yours." Nothing was said about dinner. I brought it for myself. "You can do whatever you want, but I've prepared a good dinner for you." Looking at the table, I couldn't help thinking that she hadn't cooked anything but must have bought everything in advance at the grocery store. She had never dressed like that for me. She must have had syphilis recently. Still, I suggested, "Let's eat and discuss Carrie. That's what unites us. I assume you support joint custody. Have you thought about when you're going to pick her up? I don't want to ruin our marriage. That's not what I want. I just need time to figure out if my relationship with Fred is serious. You've said this before, but now the reality is that divorce is just around the corner. I admire your optimism, but a new love can cloud your mind. I don't want to say that it's negative. Obviously, Fred is a special person. What's so attractive about him? I'm not going to compare him to you or vice versa. I'm just wondering what makes him attractive. I promise I won't step aside, so what's the matter? It's not just the physical aspect, although he's skilled at that too. He's good looking, but nothing unusual, at least from what I've seen. He seems to be pretty average in size. His scent is truly amazing, but not from perfume, from his own body. It exudes a captivating fragrance that is simply divine. He is domineering, radiates confidence and strength, but at the same time, he is incredibly attentive and kind. He listens attentively and responds with insightful comments. I feel protected in his company and try to please him. He seems to understand my desires even before I express them and directs me to what I really want, but maybe I can't formulate it. Wow, he's a really talented ladies' man. May the Lord bless you on your way. His charming demeanor extends from the hospital bed to your own bed. I feel relieved to have stepped aside, and this is a positive change for you. No more deceptions and secrets. Now you can openly declare your love. Darling, I never wanted a divorce. It was your decision. It's ridiculous to blame me. No matter what, divorce is inevitable. Whether you're ready for it or not, it's going to happen. And let's not forget that our daughter is the reason for our conversation today. I can't control my schedule, so why are you asking me this? Carrie needs stability in her life. She can't go to bed in your house and wake up in mine. She needs to know who's taking her to soccer practice next Tuesday. She needs to know in advance where she will be on Saturday to make plans with her friends. If you want to spend time with her, when can we schedule it? How will you behave if you have Carrie and one of your lovers asks you out? What will you do if you are late? I can't decide right now because this situation is still unfamiliar to me. Should we address this issue at the moment? If you agree that she stays with me, we can move forward without discussing it further. Let's consider this a temporary arrangement, knowing that circumstances may change. For now, it seems like we both agree that she will stay with me, and you can visit her whenever you can. Please do not forget to call before you arrive, as I need to be notified 24 hours in advance of any changes in plans. It's important to me that you continue to communicate with Carrie as her mother. Let's try to maintain polite relations, especially in her presence. I don't speak negatively about you in front of her, and I hope you do the same. As for the rest, I am in a difficult position and have to put up with it. Fortunately, everything is going well in my personal life. I'm glad to hear that. I hope he makes you happy. I'm sorry that I couldn't, but in the end, we both agreed that it would be better this way. It would be easier if there was no cheating, but everything happens. Now we both have a chance for a new relationship and intimacy. I'm leaving, darling. Don't forget that you initiated the divorce, not me. You talk about it all the time. Did you really not expect this? You're the one who started this mess. She managed to hold back her tears when I kissed her and left, leaving a pie wrapper with oregano and garlic on the table. It was nice to know that we both deserved happiness. At the end of that week, my luck turned. 6 months before, I had taken a chance and applied for the construction of a new high school. Despite the project being much larger than anything I had done before, I was sure my offer would be rejected due to lack of experience. The high price reflected my lack of confidence in my estimates, so I increased my initial estimate by 15% to guard against mistakes. Despite this, I still managed to take third place in the tender. Interestingly, my initial estimate, without the additional 15%, turned out to be just between the proposals of the two best contractors. Shortly after, the New York-based Lehman Brothers company declared bankruptcy, and loans were frozen. The applicant for the school contract, a well-known contractor, was later accused of bribing city officials. As a result, the city rejected his offer. On Tuesday, I was called to the school department for a conference to discuss my proposal. The second bidder suddenly went bankrupt, and I was next in line. The cost of construction had decreased by 10%, and it was expected to fall even more due to the recession. As a rule, all applications were discarded, and the process started anew, but this would lead to significant delays and possible allocation of funds elsewhere. The city government and the school board intended to create new jobs in the area by November. However, I had problems with financing because I had hidden my money during the divorce. To solve this problem, I asked for a week to study my bank statements. I spent 2 days with my cost estimators to analyze the prices and found a 20% reduction in costs. When I contacted the local bank where I had a history of transactions, they were initially hesitant to provide the necessary funds. It was only after I explained the significant price reduction that they agreed to support my project. Initially, I offered $67 million for the project, estimating my costs at $61 million. After revaluation, my new value was about $50 million. Fortunately, my numbers were verified, and I received the necessary funding. This opportunity brought me into the big leagues with the potential to earn over $15 million. One day, Sam the detective asked me to meet him at Starbucks. He showed me the records of 12 women, including my wife and another woman, who were regular visitors to the hotel. The rest were casual visitors. I told Sam to keep working the same way. At least it looked like a decent B-movie. On Friday evening, Karen called me in a panic. She was having trouble paying the bills and couldn't figure them out. That's why Carrie and I went to her house. Karen and I sat at the kitchen table while Carrie entertained the neighborhood kids. "Look at all these bills, Chris." "I don't have enough money to pay them," Karen complained. "Of course you're practically broke. Your income is not enough. Apart from the tasks that I handled and that you will have to outsource, you lose about $100,000 a year. The best option for you is to consult with a lawyer and consider filing for bankruptcy. Let's not escalate the situation to make it seem worse than it really is. As a doctor, I can't afford to be bankrupt. Perhaps you will try to charge the doctor for the services you rendered. I sincerely apologize. I usually keep my emotions under control, but that wasn't what I needed. If he's been with you for so long, it means you're doing something right both in the bedroom and outside. As for finances, consider changing jobs or finding a second job. With your medical skills, finding a job shouldn't be a problem. But if a second job is not possible, you may have to find an alternative way to earn an additional $30,000 to $45,000 a year to cover basic expenses. Don't forget about taxes. Maybe it's time to ask for a raise. I need you to provide me with funds. Have you read the prenuptial agreement that you and my father forced me to sign? I don't have to give you anything. I stopped paying my mortgage. This is a good place to start. Listen carefully. If I lose the house, I will not hesitate to demand retribution in the divorce. You will be left with nothing. You're stupid, Karen. All these arguments about money are unproductive. Your only option is to consult with a lawyer, file for bankruptcy, and sell the house. The current value of the property is about $450,000. The first mortgage is $600,000, and the second is about $100,000. If the bank reduces the mortgage amount by $300,000 or forecloses on the real estate, the forgiven debt will be taxed. For more detailed advice on this issue, it is recommended to consult a lawyer. I am not ready to provide financial assistance. I fulfill my obligations to pay bills, but I do not go beyond them. Before, when our marriage had a chance of success, I made sure that you had enough money to live according to your preferences. But since you broke off the relationship, I've been focusing on charity, not financial support. When you complain about the severity of bankruptcy laws, remember that the money you and your father donated to your congressman came back to hurt you. There is no sympathy for those who are drowning in debt or living in poverty. And one more thing, never declare a fight. Why warn the enemy? As for the threats against me, think again. Thanks to your father's connections, you won't be able to touch me. Let's not go down this path. I think our conversation is over. I'll call Carrie. She was furious. Maybe Carrie got burned when she said goodbye to her mother, and we drove home. A few weeks later, she called me and asked for a meeting. She offered to have dinner at her house without our daughter Carrie. Reluctantly, I agreed to come to her at 7 p.m. Despite my initial hesitation, I realized that my feelings for her had faded, and I saw how she was trying to manipulate me. Although the anger at her past actions still hadn't subsided, I managed to contain it. Chris, I'm grateful to you for coming. I wanted to let you know that I'm having financial difficulties. Since you left, I can't make payments on the house, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep it. When the bank eventually comes for it, I will be forced to move into a small studio apartment. I broke off my relationship with him, realizing now that he was just using me for his own pleasure. It's clear now that I was just one of his many conquests. It hurts to realize that he was dating someone else while we were together. I thought he loved me, but it seems I was wrong. I really messed up everything. At least you're still standing. What do you want from me? I want my family to be whole again. We've discussed this before. You claimed that he was your true love, implying that I wasn't. When you expected me to accept betrayal, it showed me that you don't understand who I really am. In fact, I realized that I don't know you either. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Surprisingly, I've come to the conclusion that I don't like you anymore, more than I love you. Our past defines us, not our future. The fact that he's not in your future doesn't affect our relationship in any way. Let's forget about it, Chris. I have a strong desire to take revenge on him for deceiving me with a lie. Let's also forget about revenge. It's better not to do anything and not make a fool of yourself. Doctors should be wise and stable professionals, not lovesick fools who are easily swayed by sweet words. Don't expect me to track him down and hurt him in a dark room, Karen. Remember what the Bible says about revenge. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. By the way, I think I left some books here. Can I look for them? Of course, look for them. They should be where you left them. I haven't had a chance to read anything for months. Just work, work, work. I used a bag from the kitchen to collect some novels, but I was actually looking for a book about the anniversary of the hospital. I had to search a bit and remembered that there were group photos and names there. At first, I thought about a different approach but decided not to tell Karen about it, as she might not approve. After looking through the hospital book at home, I was able to identify 9 women, 2 doctors, 5 nurses, and 2 administrative staff. There were 3 unidentified people left. I contacted Sam Spatula and then my business lawyer. I realized that I don't like being a big contractor, spending all day talking to corporate people. My real passion was working closely on historical restoration projects. As a lawyer, I was looking for a contractor interested in buying a business with a lucrative 3-year contract that would almost certainly be profitable. I offered him a 10% share of the purchase price. As for Sam, he charged an additional $3,000 for his services. We decided to meet at a local coffee shop, not at Starbucks, because the coffee was tastier there and the atmosphere was conducive to conversation. The new office where we met belonged to one of my clients, and my friend immediately gave us the names of 2 people. It turned out that they were all his patients, and it turned out that 2 of those whose names we knew were also his patients. We fabricated a fake newspaper article about a third person, changed her photo to make her look dressed, and my interlock brought her to the office to find out her last name. The last person was not only a patient but also a nurse in his office in the city center. I also studied their addresses and family information. I bought an inexpensive laptop with cash on Craigslist, and one of my assistants provided me with a stolen credit card in case I needed it. I found the nearest hotel with unsecured Wi-Fi and parked on the curb across the street to access the internet without paying or presenting any documents. Using Hale's name, I logged into the blog and uploaded Hale's Special Squad, Part 1, which featured stress-relieving nurse balloons. Each photo featured a topless nurse, and the titles were linked to 30-second intimate videos in which both the woman and Hale were easily recognizable. After that, I created an email account and used software that allows me to send personalized emails to a large group of people individually, thus making each recipient think that he was the only one who received the message from me, and it seemed that Hale had addressed him personally. This tactic ensured that the juicy gossip I shared would be passed on to other people I didn't know. I used several email lists to include both private and hospital addresses in the mailing list. The shot struck Hale directly, leaving him defenseless. About half an hour later, Karen called in a panic. "Chris, you won't believe what that jerk Hale did," she exclaimed. "He sent me an email with a photo of him with 5 nurses, his so-called special group. I know them all, 3 of them very well. How could one guy do this to 5 women?" Chris scoffed skeptically, suggesting that it must be a fake photo, but Karen insisted that it was real, explaining that they were all in the same room but taking turns at various points in time. "I can't believe it. He's sick. He wrote it all down. How could he do that? Being with 5 women in one day is impressive endurance. No wonder you're attracted to him. He must have installed several video cameras and recorded intimate activities. He may even have been broadcasting live to a receiver in his car, and of course, the broadcast could be carried out for everyone within a certain radius. Anyone could have saved the record. Don't you think this room is familiar to you? Oh my God, it was the motel room we were staying in. Oh my God, maybe he has pictures of both of us. Your moment of glory may begin soon. Someone has to take care of him. I wish he hadn't done that. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Please send me a link. I want to check it out. Besides, I need to meet interested women. Listen, I need to leave. You're disgusting, Chris. You're disgusting. The next evening, the blog disappeared. After creating a new blog, I immediately shared links with Hale, Dork, and Dr. Doxy, knowing that gossip spreads like wildfire. Of course, half an hour later, Karen called and said, someone shared my compromising photos and videos. The phone doesn't stop ringing. I'm going to deal with him. Give me the link and stay calm. Most likely, someone else will deal with him, so don't worry. People will remember what you said about him. Remember, you broke up with him long before his current troubles. I just sent you an email link. My God, what a pathetic person. I followed the link. If she had intentionally sent a malicious link and if I had pretended to know what was there before I saw it, then it would have been over. She's not that insidious, but it's better to be careful. Yes, there she is. You look amazing as always. Maybe some magazine will put you on the front cover. Thank you. His rights in our and 2 other hospitals have been temporarily suspended, so he will remain unemployed until a decision is made. Currently, nurses are treated as victims, and now doctors have been added to them. This is not what I wanted. Fortunately, being a woman fits the stereotypes in this situation. It is unpleasant to see me, a young doctor, destroying my marriage and reputation for the sake of an affair. It seems like my entire education has been wasted. I'm angry and upset. What should I do now? This is not a pun, so please stay out of the spotlight. Do not give interviews or make public statements. Most of your patients will not be aware of this situation, and only a few will see the photos. Despite the fact that your breasts are beautiful, many people have them. Most people who don't have such breasts can easily find someone who does. Only a small number of people outside the hospital will see your breasts, and most of them will not pay much attention to them and will not remember your appearance. It is very important to think about how to explain the situation to our daughter if she finds out about it. At that moment, she burst into tears. I don't know how you're going to handle this. This news will allow you to take revenge as you wanted without any risk and cost. It became known about his scandalous behavior with patients, that he was in an inappropriate relationship. His career was ruined, he lost his medical license, faced numerous lawsuits, and his wife left him. He's out of town and is rumored to be working for an insurance company in Texas. I wonder if the smell has changed his status and money. I hardly allowed myself to spend the money I earned. With the support of my antique dealer friend, I decided to invest in an Indian Chief motorcycle and another one that Hale sold for spare parts. I've always considered them something like organ donors and had never ridden them before, but I decided it would be a pleasant experience. I made sure to sign up for lessons to ensure I had the necessary skills before I hit the road. I didn't need my brother's toy anymore because now I had the real thing. I contacted the Red Cross to find out how to get a blood donation t-shirt, but unfortunately, it was not available. I explained that I needed a small t-shirt, new or used, and offered to donate $100 along with a $20 bill to whoever would find it for me. The woman I was talking to was very kind, and we agreed to meet on Friday evening to make a purchase. She seemed like a kind person to me, and I shared with her my intentions regarding the t-shirt. We laughed and exchanged email addresses. I suggested that Carrie go shopping, choose the clothes she needed, and buy a pair of red sneakers. I also gave her a t-shirt. A few days later, we got on my bike and drove to Karen's house just before it was pawned. Carrie joyfully ran inside in a t-shirt and red sneakers and exclaimed, "Mommy, look at Daddy's motorcycle. We rode it here. Have you ever ridden such a beautiful motorcycle?" Karen's eyes widened, and she whispered, "Oh, someday, you look a lot like her." The trip was pleasant while it lasted, but in the end, it ended in an accident, which turned out to be a serious mistake. "Chris, you should be careful with this." Karen decided to sue me, but to her horror, the prenuptial agreement remained in force, as a result of which she did not receive anything from me. She lost her home and was forced to file for bankruptcy. Despite this, Not all debts are forgiven in bankruptcy, so presumably she will have to live frugally for many years before she becomes financially stable again. As a gesture of goodwill, I sent her father a check for $1,000, thanking him for offering to sign the prenup and for saving me a fortune. He returned the check without saying anything. I decided to donate it to a liberal human rights group and indicated his name as a donor-owner. As part of the bankruptcy process, the wife had to provide tax returns for the previous year. For the first time, she actually looked at the documents and noticed that my income was significantly higher than hers, not to mention the large amount of money I received from the sale of my business. She was shocked and demanded to know why I hadn't told her about it. I reminded her that I had actually already shown her. I gestured at her signature on each tax return, which clearly indicated the amount of income. Despite this, she firmly believed that she was a true professional and I was just a handyman. She believed that our income came mainly from our practice without seeing reality. Perhaps it's for the best. You and your father were worried that I only married you because of your wealth. I suspect you liked the idea of being a wet nurse because it gave you a sense of power. But don't worry, you're young, attractive, and as many have noticed, you have a bright future ahead of you. You're much better in bed now than when you were with me. I'm sure you won't have any problems finding a new partner. A year later, I decided to sell my motorcycle. Although I liked the bike, I didn't ride it enough to become proficient, and I didn't find much pleasure in it. Despite this, my friend was right when he said it was a good investment. I sold a motorcycle with spare parts for the original cost of both motorcycles, and a good motorcycle costs twice as much as I paid for it.